Okay, finally, we're at the end of PD week, and this should be the fifth module that you've gone through. Hopefully, so far, everything's gone to plan. There's a good chance that it hasn't gone to plan, but we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. So the last module we're going to talk about is asynchronous learning, which I know is a word that some of us are sick of hearing, especially during the pandemic, because it seemed to come up every PD. Every session somebody was giving us new tools, somebody was giving us this wonderful app or wonderful piece of software that would magically make all of our students learn outside of the classroom. I'm not going to give you any tools. I'm just going to kind of look at what we've been doing in this course, as we've just finished an asynchronous learning course, and reflect on some of the practices and some of the implementation to see if there's any takeaways that you can use in class. So, let's talk about the elephant in the room first. I think probably in every teacher's room, or a lot of teachers I've spoken to, there is an opinion that asynchronous learning doesn't work specifically with our students. Our students don't do the work, they don't understand how to do it, they need too much help from me. There is a lot of that going around. Unequivocally, I said that right, asynchronous learning does work. It's been proven to work. It does require some responsibility from the learner, but ultimately the implementation of asynchronous learning is what will make it work, not the students. Any student can learn asynchronously if it's done correctly. So that's what we're going to look at, the how. And one of the big things that we need to realize, and like we said in the last slide, it requires a level of student responsibility that some of our students don't have. But they will never become responsible unless we give them that responsibility. So a case of trying it, pushing it, and hoping it works, and being consistent with it might build that responsibility. Anyway, if we look at the course that we've just been through, I'm going to talk about 3 things that can help implement asynchronous learning. They can help create responsibility. And I'm also going to talk about one extra thing that kind of came up in our course, but in a less obvious way. So, the first one is adaptive release, or mark as reviewed. This is something any of us can use in Blackboard. If you guys are interested, I will train you and show you how to use this, that's fine. Essentially, adaptive release allows you to release content whenever you want. Now, the most simple form of adaptive release is by time and date. So maybe this is what Ben does with the assessments. The assessment will release on March 20th at 10 o'clock. But there are other options. You can release content based on quiz scores. So for example, if you've got, let's do quiz 1.1 and quiz 1.2, you could, if you wanted, make sure that they have to get a specific score on quiz 1.1 before they can even see or attempt quiz 1.2. I find that to be somewhat successful at the beginning of term in building like a degree of responsibility. You know, those students that just try and do all the quizzes at once, doing it that way kind of controls them a little bit. What we did in this course is I set a review status, and you guys had to tick the little box to say that you have watched the video, you have read the text, and then the next content comes. Now, I'm sure some of you ticked the box without reading the content or without watching the video. There is nothing we can do to stop you doing that. And if you do this with your students, there is nothing you can do to stop them. It has to work on a trust basis, and that's where the responsibility comes in. But adaptive release is a very, very useful tool when it comes to implementing asynchronous learning. The second thing that we try to implement in this course is checking or tracking. Now, I was having this discussion with a diploma teacher last week. He kept saying, I set them asynchronous work, I tell them to watch this video on YouTube, they come to class and they haven't watched it. A relatively common problem. You have to ask yourself, where's the motivation for that student coming from? The student knows that you don't know they watched it because there's no kind of tracking, there's no checking that they've watched it before class. In our course we had like a knowledge check quiz at one point to make sure that you'd watched my video. Apologized if you feel patronized by it. It was a system to demonstrate asynchronous learning. They have to watch the video, they have to take the content, but they have to do something with that content. If you're just asking them to bring that knowledge to class the next day, there's much less buy-in from the student. There's much less motivation from them. So we had a knowledge check quiz with a video. We also had a reading. You did that PDF on Teacher Talk Time with me. And again, you had to answer 3 or 4 basic questions on it just to demonstrate that you had done the asynchronous portion of it. That's the same way it would work with your class. If you want your class to watch this video on YouTube and then come to class the next day and tell you everything about the video, it's too unspecific. They're not likely to do it, or some of them will do it, but not all of them. Some kind of checking, some kind of tracking, some kind of accountability is what we're talking about. So we had adaptive release, we had checking and tracking. We had discussion boards. I'm making this video before the PD. I'm actually interested to see if the discussion boards have been successful or not, because I've used them in external courses that I've done, and sometimes they've been very productive. The discussion's been back and forth. People have been agreeing, disagreeing, and sharing ideas, and it's been really useful. And sometimes it's been a little bit of a box tick where everybody gives their opinion, nobody listens to each other's opinions, and there's actually no dialogue. So our discussion board may have gone one of either way. We will see. One of the things we did to try and encourage you guys to discuss is we added a grade to it, as you probably saw, and that grade was also based on your responses to other people. So again, it's very grade-based motivation, and if students don't care about the grade, then it's not going to motivate them, but it's that sense of accountability. You know that you have to comment on at least 2 posts. Some of you then made very valid comments and a discussion started. Some of you maybe made some more superficial comments. Good job, I agree, excellent. It probably didn't build the discussion. But the theory behind discussion boards is it has to be at least 2-way communication, preferably 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10-way communication. My experience with students has been a little bit limited with discussion boards. It's mainly been teacher to student, which is not the purpose or the point of the discussion board, but it requires building that kind of atmosphere and building that collaboration. And using discussion boards successfully is a long-term process. It's not a spontaneous, hey, I'm going to make a discussion board and everybody's going to discuss. It's a process, it needs building. But there you go. And my fourth and final tip for asynchronous learning is the most time-consuming of all of them. I know already some of you are probably thinking, I don't have time to tick a few boxes in Blackboard to set up adaptive release. I don't have time to find asynchronous content and make a quiz or make some kind of tracking system. Some of you are probably thinking, I don't have time to monitor a discussion board and give so much feedback. Understandable. The last one that for me has been the key thing for asynchronous learning when I've had success with students is making it personal, making it about the learner. All of the stuff we've done in this course has kind of been aimed at you, targeting you, discussing your opinions, focused on your job. It's similar when I work with students. So I'm going to bring over one of my old courses a second. And this is a lot of work. This is not something we're expecting you to do all day, every day. But I'm going to show it to you. I'm going to explain it to you. I think this is Unit 11 for Stage 2. They study question words. Now, before class, I wanted them to do some asynchronous task, not to learn the question words, but just to be aware that the topic was coming and to have an idea of what we were going to study the next day. So I made this short 5-minute YouTube video of me. Unit 11 was talking about animals, so I started talking about some animals. And again, like we said with the accountability, rather than just watching the video and saying, what question words did I use? There was a listening, kind of missing word task. I think this was, why do I like pandas? How much do pandas usually eat? How tall are pandas? So the question words that we were going to use in class the next day, they kind of studied them without studying them. They got a degree of knowledge before they came to class, so I could then refer to that prior knowledge, use that prior knowledge in a semi-flipped classroom approach. Like I say, time-consuming, I know. We're not expecting you to do it all the time. But if you're interested in making resources, I think I taught Stage 2 for maybe 4 terms in a row, so I built this up over time. And each unit would have an extra listening task. The listening would be their teacher talking to them. They're much more likely to listen to you than they are to some guy from YouTube, even if that guy from YouTube is me. And yeah, there was a reason for them to listen, because again, they would get a grade. Again, I would track their progress. Again, there's a kind of accountability and responsibility built in. Did they all do it? No. Did 70 to 80% of them do it? Yes. So I would say that's a relatively successful asynchronous learning strategy. So yes, in summary, asynchronous learning, yes, it does work, but the most important thing is not the tools, it's not necessarily even the content, it's the implementation and the way that content is delivered, building a sense of responsibility, building a routine, and building in accountability. That's going to be what leads to asynchronous learning working. If you're interested in any of this stuff, as I say, adaptive release, creating little knowledge checks, making those personal resources or discussion boards, let me know, send me an email, send your SCC an email and they will contact me, and maybe it's something we can look at in the future. Okay, take care and enjoy the holiday.